Welcome to our Saturday Simulcast. It's an inside joke, but this is take 2 of the Saturday Simulcast. Mike Carmin and Tom Dienhart not necessarily smiling at me right now because I didn't hit the record button. Mike gave one of the great answers, and Tom did too, but that will never make it to the show, so they're going to have to recreate it. Maybe yes, maybe no. But thank the Union Club Hotel, Boiler Up Bar. We appreciate them. We thank them for their sponsorship. And I'll go back to, we'll give the Cliff's Notes version of what we talked about. We also had a good lunch on Friday afternoon, which would have been a great podcast, that we didn't record that either. So bad for us. No, we probably couldn't record all. Tom, I'll start with you. Obviously, the opening against Indiana State, and Purdue has a chance to get things off on the right foot. Camp has come to a close. Classes have started. We're all into that mode now. But those storylines that you're watching, what do you think is essential not only for Purdue leading up to that game, but also heading into what has transpired in camp? Or what's the state of things as you look ahead to that opener?
First, what do you guys think of my ski lodge here?
It's great.
I love it.
And then it's showing up so well in our new format. Go ahead.
And this is not fake behind me either. This is real.
I'm the only one that's fake. I mean, I'm the only one with the fake. But
yeah, I mean, when you start with the storylines, right? I mean, there's numerous storylines.
Excuse me.
You know, just with the revamped roster, the continuing evolution of the roster, the continuing churn and turnover of the roster by this staff, and in hopes of upgrading the personnel, of course. They think they've done that, especially at 2 positions, I think. The offensive line and the receiving corps in particular probably received the most help in the offseason, and then any 2 other spots. So Hudson Card year 2, right? Logic would dictate that year 2 in your system, you should be a better quarterback. You know, Purdue certainly hopes that, right? And they want to believe that. And if Purdue's going to be anywhere close to bowl eligible, he's going to have to play very well. And of course, he dealt with some injury last year that I think really held him back to a degree. So on you go, guys. And one last thing, you can't talk about Purdue football 2024 without talking about the schedule.
Yeah.
I'm sure the coaching staff is tired of it, but you can't ignore, right? I mean, Notre Dame, Penn State, Ohio State, they got to go to Wisconsin. The trip to Oregon State could be a real doozy as well. But I mentioned the Friday night Oregon game. On it goes. Ohio State and Oregon are going to be the 2 best teams of the Big Ten. Penn State's supposed to be a playoff team as well. So, I think that's one reason, guys. I know a lot of people over in the Kozich Football Performance Complex have a big chip on their shoulder with that last place prediction by a lot of people. But again, I think that schedule is a big reason why people have some doubts about the team this year, at least how many wins it could have. It could be a better team, guys, but it may not show just because of that schedule.
Yeah, no question. As you put the graphic up there, is Purdue ready? I mean, Mike, you're now getting into you've watched this for a long time. It's going to be hard maybe to evaluate based on the fact that Indiana State is Indiana State. But the opportunity to have kind of on paper, a preseason game before things get really going with Notre Dame certainly can't hurt.
No, and I call this game the free square. I mean, right. They got to win it and move on from there. And we're not going to – I don't know if we'll learn a whole lot other than maybe some individual performances that pop up. And you may not truly learn about this team until you get into deeper in September a little bit to figure out exactly who they are. But it is a new era for Big Ten. It's a new era for Purdue based on the schedule, who they have to play. But, back to the spring and the spring game, the one takeaway I had is that they look different. They look physically bigger and stronger, more athletic during that. And I think that's a credit to the type of players that they brought in from the portal, but also their in-house conditioning as well to, beef up the guys that are here. But that's all relative to the day that you play the game and who you're playing, because other teams have done the same thing.
Yeah.
But I think it appears that Ryan Walters and his staff and the program, understand what's ahead of them from a schedule standpoint and who they have to play, and they've kind of upgraded their roster to try to to try to match that as best they can. So there's intrigue with that, and then just the whole how the whole new Big Ten is going to play out. No more divisions. It's 2 best teams at the end of the year. Big Ten's never had that in recently. It's always been, strong Division East against weak Division West.
Yeah.
Now allegedly we'll get the 2 best teams in the conference playing for the championship, and that's probably how it should be.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see. Could we have Ohio State, Michigan back-to-back weeks? Maybe not this year, but we will someday, I think, when it comes to that. All right, second topic, ticket sales. The fact that Purdue is within 2,000, supposedly, not supposedly, but the reality of it all, that is that surprising to you, Tom, in terms of not only 2,000 being sold out against Indiana State, but the fact that you have season ticket sales sold out on a season ticket basis, the regular public, and to students? It surprises me. Does it surprise you?
Yeah, it does. It really does, guys. I didn't think there'd be that much excitement around this team. Given we talked about the 4-8 debut of Walters last year, largely probably a lot of people are unfamiliar with the roster with all the turnover as well. Basketball's big time here too, right? But maybe there's been an echo effect that's raising the tide of the football program too. But long story short, yeah, I am surprised, guys, that ticket sales have been as brisk as they have. We all know, we've all been here a long time and know that this still is a pretty good football following at Purdue, even though nationally outside the area, people may not realize that. But it's a well-supported program when it's playing well, right? Like most places. But again, I'm surprised that the ticket sales have been like they are. And I guess it's a testament to, the fan base and I guess some of the excitement Ryan Walters has been able to generate with some of these new players that he's brought in. So I also think, too, guys, let's not fool ourselves. The schedule's attractive, too, right? Now, Indiana State's not attractive, and that surprises me they're that close. But there's that anticipation of the season that may be fueling those ticket sales. But you got Nebraska coming here. We know what that fan base is like. You got Notre Dame coming here. Hasn't been here since 2013. You got Penn State coming here. You've got Oregon coming here on a Friday night. There's a lot of really good football teams rolling through West Lafayette, too. So I got to think the quality of some of these opponents coming to town has something to do with those brisk ticket sales as well.
Yeah. The fact that dollar amount, you only have 6 home games, which is instead of 7, so your season tickets may not actually have gone up in price. I know that's a little bit of a kangaroo statistic. But, Con, what's your take on that? We've been around. I remember you and I think, lived through and so did Tom, in terms of when they quit selling tickets or giving away tickets to students. Oh my gosh, it's the end of the world. No one will ever come. And now we're to the point where, there was Boiler Gold Rush the week before class, and you've got X number of thousand of freshmen in Ross-Ade Stadium. You got 2,000 students going to volleyball practice. The world is different. I mean, the students seem to be engaged, and that. But it still is interesting. How much does that surprise you? But also, how important is it that Purdue really stays competitive in these games to keep people coming?
Well, it's really important. But in our dark simulcast that we did before, I meant 20 years ago, if you're coming off a 4-8 season, you wouldn't have this kind of momentum from a ticket standpoint.
Right. No.
And there's a lot of factors that play into that. I think the environment that we're in college athletics, and every game being on TV, I think has kind of a younger generation. They see that every week and they want to be a part of it once they get into college. Maybe the momentum of the men's basketball team to the Final Four last year has played a role. These stadiums now are more experiences where people have parties and events and stuff that that could be driving part of it as well. As I said, the whole host of factors that are into it. But Purdue needs to take advantage of it from the standpoint they need to play well in that first game in front of a full house. and maybe you get some more people back later in the year for another game because they like what they saw, or they latched onto a player, or and things like that. The other thing, and not to be a bit of a downer on this, but I'm curious going into next year what the season ticket sales will be like, because both you guys remember back in the day when Notre Dame used to come here on an annual basis.
Sell them every other year, yeah.
Fans would buy Purdue season tickets because they couldn't get tickets to the Notre Dame home games. So how much of that this year has been driven by Notre Dame fans, or people that are used to, that want to see Notre Dame play? So I'm a little bit curious going into next year if the season ticket sales stay the same. But again, there's a lot of factors that go into it. What's Purdue's record going into next year too will probably play a role into it. But you take them where you can get them, and if they want to pay money to get in your stadium, you're going to take it. And then it's up to Purdue now to put out a good product to maybe lure people back or keep people to come to games all the time.
Yeah, I think it used to be right when things were dark in the days of Fred Akers and even the day that when, of course, now when Darrell Hazel's one game, he was the last coach to coach against Notre Dame, of course, in that 13-game. Of course, ticket sales were actually pretty good that first year because there was a lot of anticipation. Not so much in years 2, 3, and 4 for the Darrell Hazel era. All right, Tom, we all like to watch quarterbacks, and this is no different. Hudson Card is the guy that's going to be in a situation that is Purdue only go as far as Hudson Card takes them. In your view, what do you think on that?
I think there's a lot to that. I know it's a simple statement to make, You can say that about every team, I guess. But, for Purdue's sake, without a doubt, I mean, he's got to play well. He's got to stay healthy. He got pretty banged up last year. Almost missed the game in Iowa. He did miss the game at Northwestern. He took a lot of hits. And, he's a quarterback that likes to run around, too, so he's going to expose himself. But, they got to keep him healthy, number one. And the number two, you just hope that second year in the system, right? That second year, you've had a chance to get more familiarity with it. And you're a year older in a lot of different ways, mentally and physically on the football field. So you'd like to think he's going to make some strides from that front as well, just from being here for a second year. So he's got some nice weapons this year, I think. I love the tight end room with Max Clare leading the way, Drew Bibber and George Byrne. I like the wide receivers, though they've been kind of banged up in camp. I think there's some interesting personnel there, some new personnel. Corey, C.J. Smith who's going to miss the Indiana State game, and the kid from Georgia is super fast. Of course, Jamal Edrin from FAU, but they got some interesting guys there too. And having said all that about the offense, though, guys, it's really the defensive side of the ball, which probably is going to really tell the tale here. We all know Purdue historically never wins a lot of 17 to 14 games or 13 to 10. They got to score points. And that's probably going to have to be the case again this year. They finished last in the Big Ten last season, points allowed per game. And they got to get things buttoned up. They got to eliminate big plays. And can they do that? Well, there's a lot of new personnel on that side of the ball, too. I think the big question for me is they're going to be the front of that defense. How good is the line? I think the secondary is better, but how good is the line? Can it hold up against the run? And can it also get a pass rush? Now that Nick Scorton's transferred to Texas A&M, Kydron Jenkins is playing inside linebacker.
Karma, Hudson Card, obviously, from your perspective or anyone's perspective, it showed some signs of being good when he was healthy, especially. The Minnesota game was one of the ones where he was as good as advertised. And you watch some quarterbacks come through it. Obviously, all football teams, it's that quarterback that gets that leads the way in a lot of ways. But how much do you place on that? And also Purdue's ability to run the football, which Purdue did as well as any Purdue team on recent memory last year, at least from a Big Ten statistical standpoint. Put that into perspective. Well,
I mean, Hudson's got to stay healthy, and he's got to play all 12 games for them to have a shot to get to 500. We saw what happened last year when he didn't play or he was banged up, and maybe it's not realistic to think that he can make it all the way. Whether he misses a game or is just, banged up to a point where he's not as effective. But he has to be the driver on that offense to get them in the end zone a lot more. They lacked big plays last year. They had an okay receiving room, but those guys need to really step up, and Hudson needs to help them step up to have some weapons on the perimeter. And as you mentioned, I think the running game can be solid again, and I think they can get some production out of that, especially with an experienced offensive line and the guys that they have there. I think they're going to have an opportunity to move the ball on the ground, but Purdue football in a way is through the air. Yeah. And they've got to get some plays through the air, and they've got to have some receivers step up and make those plays and really help their defense along and keep their defense off the field. You do it by the running game, but you do it by getting in the end zone, and they've got to close that margin from the number of points they gave up as opposed to the points that they scored. When they lost games last year, they didn't score enough. They just didn't score enough, and they got to figure out a way to up that average and get some more touchdowns and get some points on the board.
All right. We've already kept you overtime, but I have one last question in this. And, Carm, you're going to have some time to prepare for this one because I'm going to ask Tom first. Purdue's must-win game. Tom, if you had to pick one, what is the game that is going to turn? And I would assume it would be an early season one, but maybe it is a late season one to get to that 6 wins, which Vegas is not predicting for Purdue. Give me that must-win game on the schedule. I think I know what you're going to say, but I'm curious. So go ahead.
Yeah, there are those games against peer programs you got to win, like Illinois, Indiana, Michigan State, Nebraska. And for me, that Nebraska game, September 28th, is a big one, homecoming over here. But for me, I guess I still got to go to Oregon State.
Yeah.
You got Indiana State, then you're off, then you got Notre Dame, right? Then you go out to Corvallis, and it's a long trip out there. And I know Oregon State's in transition, right? They're kind of left behind in the Pac-12. Have a new coach, Trent Bray, of course, their head coach, Jonathan Smith at Michigan State now. But again, they're in transition, but still it's going to be tough going that far west. And I remember Mike and I going out to Nevada. Mm-hmm. And oh my gosh, that was another one of those kind of games. Purdue should have won it. They didn't find a way to win. I mean, I thought there was one point in the third quarter of that game. David Bell scored a long touchdown. I said, Purdue's got this one.
Oh yeah.
Some freshman kicked like a 65-yard field those time and started.
Walk on from 54.
My point is, Purdue went out a day early. Purdue's going to go out a day early too to Corvallis. If you lose that game, man, Purdue could be 1-2, and you're coming home to host Nebraska, and boy, and it's the snow could start rolling downhill from there. Nebraska's going to be licking its chops, thinking, "Hey, man, this is the kind of team we got to start beating Purdue. They've been a pain in our rear end for 5 or 6 years now." Again, long story short, the Oregon State game, you got to find a way to win in Corvallis to come home. I'm assuming Notre Dame's a loss. Maybe I shouldn't. But again, come home 2-1, and then you got the Huskers coming in here, and that could be an electric crowd over there for homecoming on September 28th.
All right, Carm, you're going to get another 30 seconds to think about this. But, yeah, my hot take, which is a silly hot take, which is I know his talk is cheap, but it's Purdue's going to beat Notre Dame, Tom. I'm telling you right now, they will beat Notre Dame. I know. I said that on a show this morning, and I wish I totally believed it, but it makes for a good take. They're going to be 4-0 after September. Nah, maybe not 3-1. But Carm, what is your must-win game?
Well, I'm not going that direction.
I think keep from being realistic.
Ohio State.
Yeah. I'll give you that hot take in October. Go ahead.
I always love to agree with Tom because Tom knows what he's doing and how he thinks. And I think, he says Oregon State, and I firmly believe that. But the more I kind of look at Oregon State, it's like I don't know how Purdue goes out and loses that game. I know it's the travel involved, but they're in a massive rebuilding situation. And probably a stat that doesn't mean as much in today's college football as it did 5-6 years ago is returning starters. And because you're doing a lot of things through the portal, like returning starters from your team last year. And Oregon State, I think, has 1 or 2 returning starters from its team last year. That doesn't mean that they're not going to be competitive and stuff like that. My point is, I think Purdue is in a much better situation and probably has a better roster at this point than Oregon State, and that's a game that you got to go out and win. But to answer your question, I do think it's the Nebraska game, because if you beat Indiana State, if things go as we think they beat Indiana State, lose to Notre Dame, you beat Oregon State, and then Nebraska becomes like the centerpiece game of your season, because for the games against Illinois and Indiana and Michigan State at the end of the year, they've got to matter, but they don't matter if you're not in a position to get to a bowl game. And I think the path to a bowl game for Purdue is through beating Nebraska, assuming all those other things happen ahead of it. And Tom's right. Nebraska is ready to turn its program around. I know we hear this every year from Lincoln, but I think with Matt Rule there's a different vibe about what the direction they're going. Scott Frost could not get out of his own way. His ego coached the team more than he coached the team, but Matt Rule seems to have the right mindset and the right approach to get Nebraska going, not to the championship level of the Big Ten, but at least it's really mind-boggling to think they haven't been to a bowl game since 2016 out there. And I think this is a big year for Nebraska, and they can't keep losing to teams that they feel like they need to beat all the time, and that's Purdue, and that's Indiana, and that's a lot of schools in the Big Ten. But I think that becomes a centerpiece game for Purdue, because you got them at home. It's homecoming. Your stadium will be packed, and if you're coming off that win against Oregon State, at worst you're going to be 2-1, and you're going to have some momentum on your side, and you've probably done some things well enough to put yourself in a position to win that game. There's going to be a lot of attention on that game, a lot of eyeballs on that game, if both teams have started off the season on a good note. But overall, the Nebraska game is important, but I also think the month of September is huge for Purdue to get off to a good start and make those games in November mean something at the end.
Well said. I think that they're all true, and you can buy my Notre Dame malarkey if you want, but I don't think, if you're a Purdue fan, you're hoping that's the case, but it would be a monumental upset for Purdue to beat Notre Dame in a week.
What's the last time they beat Notre Dame, Al?
Not 2007, right?
Yeah, 7. Okay.
Yeah, with Charlie Weiss and a very bad Notre Dame team, and Purdue beat them. The score wasn't as much as they beat them pretty soundly. When Purdue got off to a 5-0 start on that season before it went a little bit south under Coach Joe Tiller. All right, gentlemen, you worked 23 minutes and 30 seconds plus an extra 16 that we didn't record. That was excellent. Thanks so much for that. We will stay tuned, because Brian Neubert will take this show to a new level, or at least a different level, I should say. He'll join us here.
The opportunity where you don't hit the record button.
I'm gonna, boy, and you know what? And he just walk off the set. You guys are nice enough to stand around. Brian will not put up with that. I know that.
He's like Bobby Knight.
I'm sick and tired of losing to Purdue or whatever. That's it.
Out of here.
Yeah, I do my best Chuck Marlowe imitation throughout the entire show.
Chuck Marlowe reference.
Yes, that's a first for GoldandBlack.com, I think. But there was never nothing better than the Bob Knight television show after the Hoosiers took it on the chin, just because to watch that dynamic. But we're digressing. We'll be at Brian Neubert join us, gentlemen. Thanks so much. Have a great rest of your weekend, and we'll be back shortly. And next person you'll see is Brian Neubert. Thanks so much, guys. Brian Neubert joins us, and we will be talking a little bit of basketball and a little bit of football. Obviously, Brian's been covering Purdue football in one form or another since I don't know, is it the dark ages? I don't know when it's been. It's been a while, and Brian's been
96 or so.
Yeah, and that's so you've seen a lot of things go on. I guess you always have an interesting take on where this season, what you look at and say this is the most important thing that Purdue has to do this year? How do you classify that? How do you put that into perspective this year in terms of what you'll see out of Purdue?
Yeah, when you kind of balance like the big picture of year 2 of a new coaching staff with the added stiflingness of the schedule, I think it's a situation where you don't really put a win total on it. You just put it's you just want to see signs of progress. You want to see positive developments, positive momentum, things that make Purdue relevant, put them in the national consciousness, maybe can spark recruiting a little bit so you can maintain the early energy that you get with a new coaching staff, kind of things like that. That's what, the first 2 seasons of the Braum era were kind of about, was they found a way to keep staying in the headlines, to keep building momentum and to keep generating buzz. And, I think that's probably something that's going to be important this season for Purdue. Wins are going to be hard to come by for most of the people in the Big Ten nowadays. That doesn't mean Purdue can't be successful. That doesn't mean Purdue can't have winning seasons. It doesn't mean Purdue can't go to bowl games, but it's also a situation where I think you kind of have to look at the concept of success a little bit differently now than maybe you used to. Like we used to consider 6-6 in a bowl game, a successful season. It was by most objective measures. That's probably even more of a successful season now, given that, you're playing in one of the 2 basically semi-professional college football leagues in America. And, the schedule has gotten much more difficult. And especially this year when you got Notre Dame on the schedule, you have to go to Oregon State. This is one of those years where the non-conference season doesn't do you any favors either. But, in terms of the Indiana State game, I think in the context of what this is now, I think Indiana State games every year make a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Everybody's breaking in new players in week 1. Everybody's got all these new transfers on their teams. Having that quote unquote dress rehearsal where there's actual stakes, I think gives you essentially like an NFL preseason game. But you're going to treat it like a real game because it is a real game. So it's not like you're going to, play all your walk-ons in the second half like the NFL would do. So I just think there's nothing but value in playing these FCS games to start the season now. If I know it doesn't excite fans. If your fans don't come, hey, that's just where you are. It's not like you're going to lose money playing the game. It's not like your TV contract is going to get voided because you only had X number of people at your Indiana State game, anything like that. I just think there's so much sense and so much value in playing these low major and mid-major games now in non-conference play. So, Purdue should beat Indiana State, but I'm talking here about a team that, or a program that's had to fight like hell to beat Indiana State before in very different times. And I'm talking about a Purdue team where I couldn't pick most of the players out of a lineup right now because of everything being so new all the time with this transfer portal there is. So that's kind of the big picture of Indiana State, the big picture of the season in general, in my mind.
Yeah, and I asked the other guys, does it surprise you, though, that Purdue is within 2,000 tickets reportedly of a sellout for the Indiana State game? They've sold out their allotment of student tickets and season tickets. Just based on the world today, I mean, that surprises me. But how do you view that situation in terms of, again, you're going to play Indiana State as a season opener. You were 4-8 last year, and you may have over 55,000 people, if not more, at that game.
Yeah, I think that people are still excited. I think people are probably realizing that this was something that is going to take a little bit of time in year 2 under a pretty charismatic and young and exciting new coaching staff with a good quarterback and, the unknown of the transfer portal. I think that's probably something that, kind of has people energized. I do sort of wonder if people still aren't still a little more excited about football game days after COVID a couple years ago took them away.
Mm-hmm.
I do think that the season ticket schedule or the season schedule, the home schedule, has something to do with season ticket sales. So
No doubt.
You're selling tickets to Indiana State that are essentially being bought for Notre Dame or for whoever. And I think football is still a pretty big deal at Purdue. I think, Purdue in general is riding a wave from the Final Four too, where people are just excited about Purdue. And, it's like, what's the term? A rising tide
raises all
ships. And I think Purdue's just in a good place right now from an excitement perspective. People are enthusiastic about Purdue in general and not just basketball, because basketball went to the Final Four. But I think there are some things about this team, where it projects to be a pretty entertaining product. You have a good, talented senior quarterback. You have an All-American on defense who was just a freshman last year. You have, I think, a head coach that people respond to or should respond to. I think he's done most everything right to this point. I really like a lot of the stuff he's done in terms of program building, especially in this new era. And I think the unknown of everything nowadays means everything's pretty much anything's possible. So there's a certain captivation with these seasons now that, might not have always existed in college football. And you're playing a lot of big name teams at home. So there's a lot of reasons, I think, for people to buy tickets. And, buying tickets and using tickets are, obviously two different things. But it is a very positive sign for Purdue that they've sold tickets the way they've sold tickets.
Yeah, no doubt. And that has been a storyline that you're right, though. It is interesting. Noon start and potentially very warm temperatures for that game. I know I'm giving you a very early forecast, but we shall see. But yeah, still, no matter what, I think there would have been a day that you'd have been lucky to have, you'd had 20,000 empty seats at that game just for the season opener or Labor Day weekend. FCS opponent. Not the case this year when Indiana State comes calling next Saturday. All right, we always love to talk basketball with you. You were at practice this week. The Boilermakers are back at it. In terms of
what's going on with these little captions here.
Well, see, this is where this is bells and whistles. This is the operation you work for now, Brian. Now there's some things that we're talking offline that aren't necessarily working
stuff here.
As we play, but we got graphics. I could put your phone number up there if you want. No, but what do you think about basketball in terms of after watching practice this week and what the natural evolution of this program heading into what really should be a very, very entertaining season to watch, just because Matt Painter's going to have a chance to seems to have the right blend of returnees and new guys to make Purdue really interesting, if not extremely relevant this year.
You make it sound like it's hard to get my phone number when it's been written on the inside of the stall at Applebee's for a decade now.
I know. What the hell?
I'm sorry, what was your question?
My question is, what's going on with Purdue basketball? You were out there this week. What are you taking now as in the next 6 weeks prior to when things really get going hot and heavy from a practice standpoint as Purdue prepares that season?
Well, they're good. It's just a matter of how good. I think, obviously you return a lot of important guys from a team that went to the Final Four last year. So you have a core that in itself makes you a very good team, a likely Big Ten contender, obviously an NCAA tournament team, a team that's going to have some potential to do some damage in the NCAA tournament again, and a team that can lay a foundation now. You always want to win now, obviously, and Purdue's capable of winning now. But this year, too, you lay a foundation for next year because you get Braden Smith, Fletcher Lawyer, Trey Kaufman-Renn back as seniors next year. Now, all of a sudden, you're looking at being one of those top 5 teams again and a potential Final Four team, in my opinion. This year, obviously, you're more freshman dependent than you've been probably in 2 seasons. Now, obviously, Braden Smith and Fletcher Lawyer 2 years ago were freshmen. You're not asking anyone on this team to be Braden Smith or Fletcher Lawyer as freshmen. You're not going to you might not start a freshman. You're probably unlikely at this point to start a freshman, but you got too many of them in two important roles to not have your outcomes this season heavily influenced by freshmen. So that's CJ Cox, that's Shakari Harris, that's Daniel Jacobson, all fitting into very important gaps, openings, opportunities, probably is the best word. CJ Cox and Jakari Harris is basically your backup backcourt right now. Daniel Jacobson, remains to be seen whether Purdue's going to play Trey Kaufman-Renn at center as its primary lineup, its lineup to begin with. But ultimately, they're going to have some size out there at times, too. So that's Daniel Jacobson or that's Will Berg, one or the other. But both of those guys, I'd imagine, are going to play. So getting those freshmen onboarded, getting them in a place where they're improving through the course of the season, I think is a really big deal for them. This isn't a situation like Miles Colvin where you don't really need him, so you can kind of stash him away for a month late in the season so he develops in practice as opposed to learning on the job in games. These guys got to go now. They got to play now. They're going to be out there against whoever it is Purdue plays to open the season. I cannot remember. But I think, the sky's the limit for this team, too. I think, Trey Kaufman-Renn's going to have a breakout year. He was pretty good last year, so calling it a breakout year is, perhaps a little bit fraught with inappropriateness. But did I really say that?
I know. I thought usually you're fraught with peril, but
fraught with inappropriateness might be the worst thing I've ever said in my life. Braden Smith is arguably the best point guard in the country. Fletcher Loyer is a really good player, better than people give him credit for. Miles Colvin's got all the upside in the world to make a huge jump from year one to year two. Camden Heide, I think, is a really good player, is going to be a really good player. Playing a little bit of a different role this season. I think he's probably going to be their main four, their forward, their four-man, however you want to term it. They got a lot of really nice assets on this team, and I don't think you ever really put a ceiling on what a team can accomplish, early on. I kind of view next year as Purdue's Final Four shot, but there's no reason they can't do something really big this year too, because you have a lot of the meat and potatoes of a Final Four team back. Meat and potatoes of a Final Four team back.
Why isn't it asparagus and spam?
Because if you're eating spam, chances are you're not eating asparagus. So
that's true.
Those two things are clearly mutually exclusive from one another. So
all right, we're talking Purdue basketball. Go ahead. I'm putting another graphic. I said Neubert talks Purdue hoops. So talk about it. For God's sake.
How about Neubert talks asparagus?
That too.
I think I've said everything I was going to say. I think the freshmen are going to be really interesting this year. They're kind of, they're not your best players yet, but they're essential to this team's success because there's just too many of them. And there are too many roles that need to be filled for them to not have to be at least solid for this team to be really, really good. I think if they're just average, I think Purdue is still very good. But for Purdue to be really, really, really outstanding, borderline elite, for lack of a better term, I think those guys have to be really good. And I think they might be because those three guys I mentioned before who are all going to get cast into roles right away. And that's not to say Jack Benner and Raleigh Burgess can't be. It's those three guys that I mentioned before, CJ Cox, Jakari Harris, Daniel Jacobson, that all just walk into golden opportunities because of the way things have laid out from a depth chart perspective.
Flow. Yeah, well said. All right, by the way, just because I can prove that I can Google search and listen to Brian talk at the same time, Purdue opens up Texas A&M Corpus Christi is the first official game. November 4th, the day before Election Day. But Brian and I could get into politics, but we're not going to. But that would be the day before Election Day. Of course, Purdue goes to Creighton on October 26th, and then we'll host Grand Valley State the day before Halloween. I'm just putting these things down for Brian's calendar so that he makes sure that he attends them. That's why
I ordinarily find out of games the morning of.
Yeah,
and then I realized, oh crap, I got to get to the game.
I got to go. You got to get down there.
And the Corpus Christi game scheduled under former Purdue assistant Steve Lutz, I believe, when
that
Lutz
is
was
correct.
at Corpus
That's
Christi.
why I understand it. And hopefully you'll have your car situations. I'm not making fun of your car situation.
You should make fun of my car situation.
I know, I'm not. All right, I want to last topic of the day. You're going to see it come up here, Brian. Men's basketball recruiting updates. Now, you write a lot on our site about that. You don't have to tell everything but obviously some visitors coming in. There's some drama, I guess, in what will be a very small recruiting class for Matt Painter and company, I guess. But anything else that you want to add? Because I have the graphic up there. Is there anything that you'd like to add about Purdue men's basketball recruiting updates for visitors for Notre Dame or football games or what all's going on in September?
Well, if you subscribe to our site, you already know.
You would know.
But Luke Ertl, 2026 guard, is visiting on Monday, and that could be a situation where an early decision comes down, and that would lend to the possibility that Purdue gets a 2026 commitment before it gets a 2025 commitment. Now, for the first weekend in September, Purdue has Trent Sicily, its longtime forward target, lined up for an official visit. We'll see what happens there. He's got a bunch of other visits scheduled. He's been to Purdue 100 times. He's been everywhere 100 times. So what's left to see at these places, I have no idea. But he's been Purdue's longstanding target at forward, no longer their only target at forward.
Yeah.
They have Trey Singleton from Jeffersonville, Indiana, coming in the following weekend, and then Sebastian Williams-Adams from Texas coming in later in the month. Purdue has always wanted a forward in this class, so their hope is to get one of those three guys. Whether there's a preference or not, I have no idea. For the longest time, Sicily was the only guy they were recruiting, but since then they have expanded their board, as they were always bound to do. Purdue also needs a guard in that class. Antoine West is coming in September, I believe, the second weekend. Scoring guard, kind of a combo, shot creator, athletic enough, kind of a scorer. And, Purdue's going to have a need long-term, I think, for a backcourt scorer, because you got to start preparing for the days when Braden Smith and Fletcher Lawyer are gone. You got to start thinking about, hey, Miles Colvin's, a sophomore already, and, he's not going to be at Purdue forever. And, CJ Cox and Jakari Harris might be your long-term backcourt starting the day that Braden Smith and Fletcher Lawyer are gone. But having a scorer to mix in with those two defensive-minded guys, and I'm not saying they can't score. CJ Cox is a shot maker, and Jakari Harris can shoot and get to the basket and things like that. But having a creator, having a guy who can fill that category that, like Carson Edwards and Etwan Moore and Jaden Ivey, to a certain extent, filled. I'm not saying he's that caliber of player. He might be. Who knows?
Yeah.
But I think that's an important thing moving forward for Purdue and its overall mix. So I think Antoine West is one of those A-list guys that people aren't necessarily jumping out of their chairs for updates about at this stage, simply because we haven't written about him a whole lot, because the forward thing has sort of taken up a lot of gravity. And I didn't get to see the kid in July, so what people think tends to be guided by what we're writing about to a certain extent. That's just the nature of when you cover something. That's what people are conscious of. I never saw Wes play. We never had video. We never had really interviews with him until I talked to him the other night. We'll have something on the site here in the next couple of days. But I think he's a really big priority that people ought to be really conscious of. Purdue is likely out on Braylon Mullins, as it was always going to be. I think that was a long shot to begin with. He's not going to make an official visit to Purdue, as he said he planned on doing for the longest time. How he was planning on taking like 10 official visits was always a mystery to me. But he did unofficially visit Purdue, so I guess it's conceivable he could just wake up one morning and say, "Hey, I want to go to Purdue." But I would say that's extraordinarily unlikely, and that's not surprising one bit. And to be honest with you, with this 2025 recruiting class, in the short term, there is no desperate need, provided none of these known commodity guys turn into pumpkins this year, and everybody at least takes a modest step forward going into their senior years, their junior years, whatever it might be in 2025. There's no desperate need, no absolute must-have situation. So if you have an open scholarship for a potential last piece of the puzzle transfer, that's not the worst thing in the world. Now, also, with these rosters going to 15 people instead of 13 scholarships, you might have had that flexibility to do that anyway, no matter how many people you signed. So I think Purdue probably takes 2 guys in their best case scenario, could push it out to 3. But if it's going to be 15-man rosters from here on out, I don't anticipate Matt Painter ever wanting 15 scholarship guys in his team.
Yeah.
You can't use 15 guys. Just like a football team can't use 105 scholarship players or whatever the number is now. Is it 105 or 115?
Well, yeah, that's what it's going to be, right? No,
105 or 115?
105.
No one can meaningfully engage 105 scholarship players on a football roster. No one can really use. Ask women's basketball coaches. If you get them in a moment of honesty and say, do you need 15 scholarship players like they've had forever? No one's going to say yes. Do 15 players ever play? No.
Not at the same time.
So I don't anticipate.
We're not in a rotation.
Well, not at the same time.
Yeah, not
be,
and by
that would
rule,
be some
they
sort
don't
of
play
technical
by the
foul.
same
That would be some sort of infraction.
Yeah, I know. I'm sorry.
What would happen? I've actually never known this rule. If you just put 6 dudes on the floor and just pretended like everything was normal, and they played,
foul.
Would that be a technical? Or
yes,
they wouldn't eject somebody or something.
No, it would be a technical foul because they were assuming as soon as the refs called, and that's happened before. But yeah,
what if you just denied it? What if you just say we don't have 6 people out there, and then the ref counts them up, and you still just deny it? There's
a thing called video.
Deny it.
Well, I know, but
it's a deep fake.
Right.
No, so 15 scholarship players is too many.
Yeah,
I don't anticipate Matt Painter ever having 15 guys on scholarship. He might have 15 players in his team, and this is where the difference between scholarship limits and roster limits come into play. But I think what the 15-man roster limit does for Purdue is it gives them wiggle room in recruiting. Like oversigning is no longer a thing. It's if you get your guy, you're covered. Now, had things fallen a certain way this year, they were going to have to get creative with like an NIL walk-on to make the 13 scholarship limit work. You never have to worry about that ever again, unless you lose your mind and you get 15 scholarship players, and then you try to sign a 16th, which would be absurd. But I think that, Purdue can take 2 in this class, 3 in this class, whatever it might be. 3 might be the wiggle room. So, as I say all the time about the current climate of college athletics, numbers are but a figment of your imagination. They don't exist.
Yeah,
they are just theory.
Yeah,
don't put any stock in numbers. They're all just meaningless units of measure that really don't have much relevance in terms of what college coaches actually do.
Yeah. All right. On that note, I'm put another banner up and said, thanks to the Purdue Union Club Hotel. We want to thank them for their sponsorship. Thanks to Brian Neubert, Tom Dienhart, Mike Carmin. We're looking forward, I think that's the right term, for the start of football season and game week. It's always an exciting time of year. It just puts us right on the edge of our seats, right? So we'll look forward to doing that. We'll be back. Now, how it will work after games, we will have our Saturday simulcast. Typically, we'll post within about an hour and a half after Purdue's football games. Of course, for some of those games, Oregon State will be an 8:30 Eastern start. But we'll still get that knocked out after that game as well. But that will be our regular schedule for the next few weeks, with the exception of the bye weeks. We'll come back and maybe we'll bring in Mr. Neubert to think of some more good topics to talk about, asparagus and spam or whatever we hit on earlier, and why that isn't a viable food combination. I think you articulated that well, right?
What's this color we're looking at behind us? I'm
That's
entranced.
What?
Entranced by it.
You mean the gold? Well,
it's not gold. It looks
Well,
like somebody took peanut butter, spilled some milk in it, and stirred it up.
This is a work in progress, as we always say, but it is, and we're trying. I just learned solely that, and when we have 3 people on, Brian, it blocks out our logo, and that's not even our logo. We're working on that as well, but heck, everything else, we're going to make things, trying to make things better for the consumer. We'll see if we do that, but most of all, we thank you for watching and or listening or doing both. Throughout the course of this 45 to 50 minute show. And again, thanks to Brian Neubert and to Tom Dienhart and Mike Carmin. We had some fun at the Union Club Hotel. We'll be back next week after the Indiana State game for more fun and games. Also, keep in mind, as we've been running that little ticker below, you can subscribe. You can become a member of GoldandBlack.com. There will be some specials next week. Make sure you check them out, and we will entice the living heck out of you to subscribe. It's time or become a member of the biggest community of sports community for Purdue on the internet, and we would highly recommend you do that.
You can read terms like fraught with inappropriateness,
right?
Figment of your imagination, and other such things.
Potted plant, we going way back to that, but that still is still forever be attached to you, I think, for that as well. So, all right, have a great weekend, everybody. Thanks so much for watching or listening, and we'll look forward to seeing you next week on our Saturday Simulcast.
Do you know the GoldandBlack.com logo behind you is backwards?
Yes, but I don't know how it's going to turn out when we get there. But I tried to do that again, working private. But we want people to think during this show. So all right, have a good one.
Watch our show in the mirror, everybody.
Yeah, that's what we're going to do. All right, be good, my friend.
Right.
Thanks.